Hey, Kakara here, and I didn't make an episode in April. Whoops. So full transparency, now that I'm getting into, well, you know what? Hold on. How you guys been? I hope you guys have been all right. Hope your spring is starting off nicely. Mine has been kind of crazy. Now I can get back into the full transparency bit, but April was kind of wild for me. Not only was it my birthday and leftovers is 7th anniversary, so I was trying to figure out. I spent most of the month trying to figure out what to do for that, and I just ended up like doing this kind of cool poster, which is what is going to be the speed paint for today. If I don't do the other thing that I wanted to use as a speed paint too, but I ended up just doing the poster. I was going to do like a whole 7-year walkthrough for like what it means to, or what it takes to like work on a story for like a long time, because I feel like a lot of the time when you see an artist that's worked on their story for a while, it's like, oh man, like you've been super dedicated for 7 years. Wow, like I can never work on something this long. And I was gonna do a walkthrough and just be like, hey, it's really not like that. it's kind of more so life happens and you work on your story around that. But I figured, hey, it's only the 7th year. I saved something like that for the 10th year or something. I don't know. But as you can probably tell by my voice, I've also been pretty socially burnt out in April. And also, like I said, I haven't done an episode of this in a while, so it's going to take me a while to get back in that mojo. As far as like recording goes, or the energy for recording goes. But I've been pretty burnt out in April socially. A lot has been going on with regards to, like I said, trying to get the anniversary stuff together, then also doing commissions and just like being burnt out. I think the streams definitely have a lot to do with it too. My Picard Peruses streams, but that's for another time, because I have to like look into changing up something in regards to the streams, like the changing up the schedule, so I'm not having every weekend where I'm streaming. This May is going to be an every weekend stream, but maybe like after that I'll figure out something else to do. But that's not we're not here for Picard Peruses. We're here for leftovers vlogs. And in regards to the hiatus that I've been going on, I didn't think it was gonna be as crazy as it was. Like when I sat down, I was like, oh, today I was like, oh, I haven't done an episode for April, so I guess I can like run down some stuff and or just run through what I've done and everything, because I'm mainly for those of you who don't remember, I've mainly been at I've entered the narrative portion of the hiatus, where I actually am starting to sit down and work on the story. So I was like, oh man, not only have I not done a lot the past month, but also a lot of the stuff that I have done is like spoilery, and so I was sitting down trying to figure out what episode was going to be about, or what this episode was going to be about, and I sat down and I took notes, and like actually it's actually been kind of wild, and I didn't realize it until I took notes today. So I'm gonna try not to make this, I think I say this every time though, but I'm gonna try not to make this episode too long, because I have a list of all like the rounds that I went through for the month of April, where I was trying to figure out, because unlike the other things where it was just, oh, fill out these worksheets and it's pretty self-explanatory, I now have to figure out where to start with, because the rest of this hiatus is just like work on the story, and it's like it's you would think that it's oh, sit down and start working on the story, but for me, as far as trying to like maintain my pantser mentality, I need to work on frameworks for leftovers, as opposed to just going through like writing the chapters in chronological order. So I needed to figure out like what the general framework was for, not only for the story, but also for how I was going to approach figuring out the framework for the story. I promise it's gonna make more sense when I go through like the rounds and stuff. But basically, I've been so like nose to the grindstone with that I just hadn't really, because most of April was me trying to figure out what the hell I was doing. I didn't actually understand where my direction was until literally last weekend. No, this is the last weekend of April. So right before, the weekend before last weekend, right before my birthday, right before the anniversary, is when I finally found out what direction I was supposed to be taking with regards to writing the story stuff. So I didn't think I had much to talk about, but turns out I have a whole month worth of struggle to tell you guys about, leading up to last weekend, where everything just kind of clicked. Last weekend? Yes, last weekend. Not this past weekend, but the 24th weekend, where everything just kind of clicked. So yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and, before I get into things, because a lot of this stuff going forward is going to be more spoilery, let me know if you guys have anything in particular that you want to talk about, because I'm gonna have to break away from specifically talking about my hiatus until I figure out how to do that without spoiling anything. Even today, you'll see like later on this episode, I had to figure out like some different terms to use, because I'm like, do I want to spoil that? Nah, I don't think I want to do that, because it's a pretty big driving force behind Leftovers story. So I'm like, yeah, I'll figure out some you'll know when the terms come up. But I'm gonna be like reading from my list for the majority of this, so I'm sorry if I sound robotic. But yeah, if you guys know anything that you want me to talk about, like story-wise, or not story-wise as in like leftover story-wise, but just like if you're curious about something, like I said, Leftovers just hit 7 years, so if you're curious about, what it's like working for, working on something for 7 years, or what that process is like, or how do I keep myself motivated, stuff like that, just let me know, like comment and let me know if you want me to talk about stuff like that, because I think that's where this Leftovers vlog series is going to be pivoting to for a little bit, until I start like figuring out how to talk about all this stuff without spoiling anything. So yeah, last we left off, now we can get into the bulk of the episode. Last we left off, I had finished mostly the tedious part of my worksheet, so I thought. I finished the tedious part of my worksheets, which was the Pokemon species cards, the holidays, all of it really, for the beginning of this year up to April. Government, world building sheets, Pokemon culture, human culture, stuff like that. So if you're looking at the hierarchy, which hopefully I put up, hopefully I put that up on the screen. We're looking at the hierarchy. The next step on there, moving down, is to go to the characters. So main characters, secondary characters, and character dynamics. That was my next step. So I went in, and my first step with that was to like list out all of my main characters. But here's the problem. Because all of my characters I know so much information about all of my characters, even background characters, right? So everybody seemed important, and I didn't realize until I started trying to list out my characters that I never made a distinction between who's a main character, who's a secondary character, tertiary, etc., etc. So I was like, alright, let's try this. So there's several storylines and Leftovers that run parallel to each other. I won't mention what the storylines are because that's spoilers, but they have already started, and they'll be more apparent like as I start releasing pages again, especially now that I know what the storylines are, and I know like where they branch off. Right now they're kind of like intermixed into stuff, and I've just been kind of sifting through them, like, oh, that could be its own storyline, oh, that could be its own storyline. But we'll know as soon as I start like posting pages again where things start branching off. But yeah, I mentioned that because I was like, all right, maybe what I can do is I can like categorize all of my characters by the storyline that they're most important to. So I ended up, grouping everybody and where they belong as far as like what storyline they contribute the most to, and et cetera, et cetera. But that didn't help me narrow down. That didn't help me narrow down anything, actually. And so I realized, do I want to say like the rounds? Okay, so I guess that technically constitutes as round one. Round two was me realizing that the reason why I couldn't break down what character was a main character or secondary or whatever is because, like, for each storyline, is because I didn't know enough about the storyline to know who was the key players, or the storylines to know who were the key players in each line. So the next step, I decided to just skip past the character portion in the hierarchy, and I went directly to narrative crafting, overarching story arcs, and themes planning, which involves the, if you remember from the worksheet video that I put together, that involves the 3-act structure worksheet. And I have to say, because I do have this worksheet like in my the downloads, actually I should probably put that up in the description. Yeah, I'll try to remember to put the description. I'll try to remember to put in my worksheets that you guys can follow if you want to. But specifically the narrative crafting, or the 3-act structure worksheet, is based on Abbie Emmon's 3-act guide. I used that as a framework and just distilled it down into like things I needed and things that I would understand, or terms that I would understand. So I'll also link her video in the description, because you should go there if you want like a non-distilled explanation for it. But for me, for my explanation of this sheet, I suppose, the 3-act structure is, it's the act 1, act 2, act 3, but it's broken down into like the hook, inciting incident, game changer, climax, stuff like that. Basically the rising action and the falling action are broken down into different steps. And for me, the sheets were important for me to get a look at things broadly, but not broad enough to where I can't make connections and draw a through line for like the story. So I'm not just saying like, oh, this is act 1, this is act 2, this is act 3. I'm breaking it down within each act, so that way as we move through the worksheet, I'm also moving through the story and I can see like where the connections for certain things are. It's a really good system, and I'm glad I came across Abbie Emmon's video for it, so definitely go check that out. So I was like, alright, you know what, I'm going to take that worksheet, the 3-act worksheet, and I'm gonna look at the entire story of Leftovers, at least what I have planned for the entire story of Leftovers at that point, and I'm gonna do one worksheet per storyline, just so I can see like, okay, where do all the things fall for each storyline, and it worked for fleshing out the journeys of the main character for that storyline, like the specific character, because each line, I'm gonna get tired of saying storylines. But it worked for each storyline is named after a character. Again, I won't spoil that because I just won't spoil that. But each storyline is named after a character, so it worked. Doing the sheets that way worked for fleshing out the main storyline for, or the journey for each of the characters that are like at the head of the storyline. And what I was gonna do is do a full story one, and then for each one, like let's say, this isn't really a spoiler, Asadi's story, right? Asadi's story, I call it baby steps, because that is her whole thing. So baby steps, that storyline. So I was gonna do a 3-act structure sheet for the entire story, and then I was gonna do each season, do a 3-act structure sheet for each season. So I have the whole storyline, or I have the whole series storyline, but then I also can further break that down. And that's really what this whole process has been, is just like pulling out and looking at broad things, and then breaking things down within that, which will only get like further corroborated later on in further rounds of this convoluted April session of me trying to work out how to write my own story that I've been working on for 7 years and still don't know details. So but yeah, so that worked for those individual characters, but it still didn't help me figure out who was a main character. I wasn't actually thinking about who the other characters that were involved in each storyline, so it didn't really help me at all when it came to trying to figure out, okay, who's a main character, who's a secondary character, and which other storyline. Didn't help at all. So this is where we take kind of a little detour. So I don't know if you remember, I forgot what episode it is, or what episode it was, that I was talking about. It might have been the last episode, actually. I think it was last episode. But I was talking about Destination Hoenn, where I was pretending to go on a vacation to Hoenn, and I was going around and I was, drawing the towns and stuff, and like looking at the sites and everything. And I couldn't like continue doing that because a lot of my enjoyment of working on leftovers depends on discovering places with the Saudi. So I stopped doing that. But I also mentioned, this was like a while back, I think it was in episode 2, whatever the episode the government worksheets were in, or it might be episode 3, whatever one the government worksheets were in. I mentioned at one point that the way I was writing the way I was like describing each of the departments sounded like character sheets. So I wanted to go in and make characters based off of the character sheets. So in that little break where I was working on Destination Hoenn, and I was like, oh, you know what, I'm not gonna do this anymore, I instead switched and was like, you know what, maybe I should do this, character design thing. And it was like kind of stressful for a little bit because I haven't like just straight up designed characters in a really long time. Like I usually do that when I'm working on pages, but I haven't worked on pages in a while. But I'm sorry. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll just go in and I'll just, do my best. Low stakes, like don't be too hard on yourself. And I actually ended up designing I ended up designing all the characters, all of the department leads. But they're like hot. Like all of the character designs are like, oh my god, I can't even. Maybe I'll show. You know what? I might just do like a scroll on screen right now, so you can see, just random, or not random, but you can see like a run through of. I won't tell you what they are, or you don't know what departments they are, but just to see like the amount of diversity and range that all these character designs have. And I was like, oh no. Because at this point in time, the government had just been like, the government of Hoenn had just been like an entity, right? It's just, it's there, it's causing whatever problems happen in the story. But now they had faces. Now they had faces, and I was like, oh, this literally made it so much harder for me to approach any kind of storyline, whether it's the Saudis or whoever's, without first addressing the fact that like the government, they're characters now. and it just added to, because I already have a problem with making my background characters, like giving them like stories and stuff. So now I have all these people that are important in the government that have faces, and I want to like, I want to develop them and I want to live with them for a little bit. And there's one character in particular, one character who I would even say represents Hoenn for me. Like, he is that, you know what, that's all I'll say. But he's lived in my head rent free since I created him, and I was like, all right, I got to do something with this. But it before we go into round 3, that was my conundrum for like a bit. It's just, oh man, okay, I have my small cast. Well, some of you wouldn't say that it's small. Like, I have a ton of characters, but I just increased my cast like tenfold, and I'm like, oh man, I want to do more with them. So I needed to, at this point, take a different approach to things. And so now we enter into round 3, where I wanted to try. It even sounds pretentious, like saying it a little bit now. It's gotten a little better for me, but I wanted to try something a little pretentious, because you know how sometimes in like I'm trying to think what I could think off the top of my head. Alright, I'll just say, so Hoenn itself is a character in Leftovers, and it just sounds pretentious because it's a lot of I hear that a lot of the times in like movie reviews and stuff, where they're like, oh yeah, like the land itself is like a character, or the location is a character. I don't know why it sounds pretentious. It's just, I mean, that is a real thing that people will go into, you know, something doing where they're like, oh, the location needs to be a character. So I was like, all right, I finally have to accept the fact that Hoenn itself is a character, and I have to say that out loud. Hopefully you guys like understand where I'm coming from here, because it doesn't, now that I'm saying it, it doesn't sound like as big of a struggle as it was, but it took me a little bit to kind of admit that that okay, Hoenn is a character. I need to take a step back. Like I was saying, we're starting general. I need to take a step back, and I need to figure out the character arc that Hoenn goes through, the region goes through. But how do I quantify that, right? Because it's a region. It's so many different moving parts. How do you quantify what character arc a region goes through? And that's where the government departments come in, because now that I have faces on these government departments, I can turn each department into basically a character, and that character that is a figurehead for what that department goes through, and all of the departments together make up Hoenn's government, obviously. And Hoenn's government, it essentially was like, who better to describe the region than the group that leads and shapes it. So now that I had like all these government people, the leaders of the government, and then I have like the government of Hoenn has a face now. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna take a step back again, and I'm gonna do a general worksheet, the 3-act structure worksheet for the whole story. But this time, I'm gonna do it from the point of view of the Hoenn government. Or was I doing it from the? So I call it the Federation of Hoenn. That's like what the government, the region is referred to in the story. So I was like, all right, Federation of Hoenn. I'm gonna do a 3-act structure worksheet for the entire story from their point of view, and see where it gets me. Because at this point, I'm just experimenting, honestly. I don't really know all of these characters yet, and they lead the government or they lead the region that all of the characters I do know live in. So let's see if we can get to know them a little bit more. And so I started working on that. sorry, I'm reading my list again. Shows me how Hoenn and Lolll at the top across the story. Oh, right. Okay. So the reason why I did that is because I wanted to see like how Hoenn how the leadership and stuff in Hoenn evolved, because like I said, these people are leading the region that my characters that I do know are living within. So their lives depend on what happens at the top in Hoenn. So I wanted to see how Hoenn's like leadership and like policies and stuff evolve at the top, so I can then filter it down to the bottom. But after I did the general worksheet, I was like, all right, I have a kind of a gist of what's going on. But then I was like, all right, I'm going to take a leap, and I'm going to start doing the individual season worksheets, or individual season 3-act structures sheets for the government. Again, just like still working with that group of people. Now I had to break this down even more, because how do you like the using the government as an entity and doing a character arc sheet, a 3-act structure character arc sheet for them, fine. But if I'm doing each individual season, the government does not all move as a single entity across the entirety of Leftovers. So I had to break it down even more, and I made a chart where it had each department or like entity in the government, because a few of them aren't actually departments, on the left side, and then on the right side for each individual season, I did a chart. On the right side, I had either where they start the season, the department or whatever, where they start the season, or what their grand motive or whatever is throughout the season, what their arc is throughout the season, if I know what their arc is throughout the season. And obviously, of course, like I'm working with each individual department, but I'm thinking of these characters that I spent some time designing. So I started doing that, and then I took that, like what everybody is doing for like season 1, for instance, took what everyone in the Hoenn government is doing, each individual department, and I was able to put that into the 3-act structure sheet and focus on what departments move the story along. And I started kind of like paring things down to where it wasn't like all these departments and everything is huge, the government's huge. It was now suddenly like basically, so you know how I mentioned I didn't know who my main characters were and my secondaries because everybody felt important? That's kind of what I ended up doing with these 3-act structure government sheets, is where I started picking out what departments actually contribute the most to the story, and those were my main characters. And by the time I got through most of the seasons of Leftovers, I had my main characters picked out. And not only that, but I knew what constituted as a main character in like that government story. It's so weird because like the government story is the skeleton, but like what goes on in Leftovers, a lot of it is largely unrelated to that, because I'm just following like Asadi, right? I mean, there's other storylines, but I'm mostly following Asadi. And how many of us on our day-to-day are directly, and I don't want to say directly, how many of us are directly influenced by our government, but how many of us, have a say in what the government does. Like, a lot of people are just living their lives, basically. So, even though I'm sitting down and I'm trying to figure out what the government's doing, it's all frameworks for where my other characters, like how their lives are dictated, basically. So, yeah, I went through most of the seasons. But then I should also mention that a lot of the something I said quite a bit when I was going through something I said quite a bit when I was going through the other rounds and rounds. I feel like that's and the other parts of this hiatus thus far, the other 3 months where I was working on the worksheets, the tedium of the worksheets and Pokemon species cards and stuff. One thing I was constantly reminding myself, because I didn't want to stress myself out, is that like, okay, well, I'm not actually, writing the story, so just like put something out there, and it's just kind of like an approximate. Like when I was doing my Pokemon species cards, it's like, all right, I don't know for certain if this tidbit is going to play into the story, but that's okay. That doesn't matter right now because I'm not actually writing the story. Just put something out there that sounds fun, and something that you might want to work on later on. And then don't worry about whether or not it's actually going to factor into the story. You can always redo this sheet or whatever once you start actually writing the story and figure out, where the story is going to go. I can't do that now. And I found myself actually saying that a couple times, like, oh yeah, it doesn't matter, just put this down. But it's like, no, it does matter. This is the story. This is the story that I'm writing. So I need to actually like put down plot points that I want to incorporate, and like I need to approach things more seriously now. So that was a little bit stressful. But obviously down the line, if I want to cut stuff and I want to like rearrange stuff, I'll be able to. But I want to have a good foundation first going into things, and I want to think seriously about the themes and about the ideas and how they connect while I'm at this stage. So no more, oh, it's not that serious. It is that serious now. So I just wanted to put that out there because like that's where we're at now. But yeah, so back to the 3-act structure for the government. So I was going through most of the seasons, and I got to the last season, and I realized that if I'm going to be detailing the end of the story, because again, gotta be serious now, so this is the end of the story, this is how Hoenn develops as a whole throughout the comic, this is where I want the region to be at, so then I can take those worksheets and then figure out like where does Asadi's story fit within this, and everything else. So I'm like, all right, if I'm gonna be detailing the ending of where Hoenn ends as a whole in its development, then I can't just do so by talking about the government. I can't continue factoring in I can't continue without factoring in half of the population that isn't taken into account in politics. And this is when I realized that like I gotta go back. This is actually where the part comes in where I'm like trying not to spoil anything. So let's move on to round 4, and we're gonna set up some operative terms real quick. So I'm gonna refer to Hoenn's government as the yin, and I'm gonna refer to the non-specific other half as the yang. And I don't want to spoil like who's in the other half, whatever is going on with that, but just know that Hoenn's yang, the other half, is something I can't just ignore, because they have an entirely different culture and outlook on life, and like denying that side of distinct voice would actually be flying directly in the face of the things I was starting to notice like popping up throughout the story. So I had to go back to the drawing board basically and figure out, all right, I already did Hoenn's like the government and all that. I already did like the departments and everything, but like now I got to figure out what is basically I had to define Hoenn, the yang. This sounded really nice in writing, and now it's like kind of confusing, but Hoenn's yang, I had to define the other half's culture and go back to like that mindset of putting together the building blocks of how that side lives before I can figure out where that side is going narratively. So I got like a pretty good system going, one that I'm not gonna like specify I was going to, but I feel like that would give away the other side. But I got a pretty good system going. It's one that's like dependent on Hoenn's government, but also foreign enough to it to support a lot of the plot points I've been working with. I even made like a compare and contrast chart for like the yin and yang cultures, like where they overlap, which was really helpful actually, surprisingly helpful, because it sounds like a compare and contrast chart. It sounds really derivative, like the stuff that you work on when you're in school, but like it's there for a reason. I can't sleep on some of these like simple story helping tools. So, alright, next step, which was like kind of a bummer, is that I had to basically go back to look at the yang side and do exactly what I had done with the Hoenn government side, which was do the main story, the whole story, 3-act structure sheet for the yang, and then also catch up the yang in seasons 2 where I was, because like I said, I'm in the last season for Hoenn's government as far as the worksheets go, as far as figuring out what the plot and everything. So I'm like, all right, I got to do a general plot, then I got to catch all the way up to the end of seasons to the government worksheet. But then I realized I didn't actually have to do any of that. Which is, I'm glad that I realized that, because I saved myself a lot of time with that. But now I finally felt like I had a complete picture of Hoenn without tying its character arc to any one group. So basically, I had, without realizing it, I answered my question in the beginning, or like at the beginning of doing these narrative worksheets, where it's like, man, how do I quantify Hoenn? Like, how do I quantify and identify Hoenn as a character? And I basically had figured that out by adding the yin side and adding the yang side and the characteristics of both. I kind of painted an entire picture of how the region operates and how the region moves. So that kicked off the final round, which is round 5. So at this time, and to go back to what I was talking about in the beginning, at this time I was feeling pretty socially burnt out. And this was all throughout April, but it hit a peak last weekend. So last weekend, which is the 24th of April, I took a social detox where I turned off, I put all of my stuff on Do Not Disturb, and I was like, you know what, I should listen to a bunch of new vaporwave albums, because, and if we're far into this speed paint, you can feel you can tell the vaporwave, the aesthetic that influenced my my anniversary picture. But I was like, I missed, because last year when I didn't have a job, I would just listen to albums and experience new albums for the first time, and that's something that I haven't really been able to do for a while. So I was like, you know what, I'm gonna zone out, not talk to anybody, and just listen to some new albums. And I ended up, like, what was supposed to be just me chilling and trying not to work so I didn't burn myself out, ended up being the keystone weekend for me working through a lot of the like, basically I wrote my ass I wrote my ass off that weekend, and this time I was finally able to do it. I was like, I made a series of worksheets for Hoenn as a whole, and I called it a Hoenn saga, which if you're familiar with like just like Leftovers, the entire title of Leftovers is Leftovers, a Hoenn saga, and that's a subtitle that I've been trying to like channel for years, but never really knew how or where to start. And I finally got it. I finally put the Hoenn in a Hoenn saga this past weekend. And I not only hashed out the region's like entire arc for all the seasons, but the themes and how they might reverberate into individual storylines. I even hashed out like some of the characters that I've been trying to figure out how to incorporate for years, which was, man, when I tell you I was on one, I tell you I was on one this past weekend. I couldn't really here I use this word again. I couldn't really quantify I couldn't really quantify or like figure out how to let people know, because again, it's spoilers. Like, I can't tell people about, well, I had probably should get a spoiler buddy. I have somebody who's like kind of a spoiler buddy, like half spoiler buddy, but I don't want to spoil them on everything. But there's so much stuff clicked this past weekend that I just want to scream about it. But all I can do is just hold it close to my chest and wow you guys when I actually end up putting it into the story and actually end up like making pages again. So, but yeah, a lot of this stuff I had been trying to figure out for years, and it was like it all got unlocked last weekend, which like by the skin of my teeth, because I was trying to again, this weekend is the last weekend of April, but I was really like, man, I want to finish like my goal was to get the overall themes and like outline of the story done by the end of April. I didn't think I was gonna do it with the way the rest of the month was going with me, like trying a bunch of different stuff. I was like, you know what, I'll give it May. But I actually ended up doing it. I ended up doing it a week early too, and I think this is sounding really familiar because I feel like I had another goal where I was like, oh man, I ended up doing it like, yeah, I think last video actually, I ended up doing or finishing my goal like a week early. Listen, I just, any of you guys out there are like the procrastinator type. Now granted, I wasn't like necessarily procrastinating throughout this month, but I'm definitely the skin of my teeth sort of person, by the skin of my teeth, where I just be coming in last minute with bangers. So if any of you guys are like that too, like let me know in the comments. But yeah. Whew, okay, this is 41 minutes. Not bad actually. I didn't think this was gonna be that long of an episode. So I'm glad that it's pretty sizable. I'm sorry I've been kind of all over the place, I feel like, with this. But last thing to talk about is where I'm headed now. So hilariously enough, I'm actually heading back to where I started out this kind of narrative journey. I'm going back up on the hierarchy, and I'm working on my characters, because now I actually know who my main, secondary, and tertiary characters are. And trust me, when I was like listing them out by storyline, it really hurt me to leave some characters out, like my poor babies, like Vander. You're just not a main character, man. I love you, but it hurt me to leave. It hurt me to leave some of my babies out. Especially those who've been there since the beginning, and you never know, they might actually become main characters. I still have to flesh out. I still have to actually flesh out the storyline. So I'm starting with getting all my characters and giving them, filling out their worksheets, which I might put on the screen because I have a picture of the one that I printed out, or I mean exported. I don't know, from InDesign. But yeah, so this is the immediate next step is to work on the character arcs, or not the character arcs, but just the character sheets, and then I'll work on the group dynamic sheets and stuff like that, where I'm getting assembling all my characters together, and yeah, then I will actually have to start. Then I'll actually have to start building the story, which is I came back up because I went home this weekend for my birthday, and I was on the drive back up. I was like, oh my god. I thought I really did something, but really I didn't do shit. The story's not even written still. Like I said, the government shit is just frameworks. Like I haven't even written the actual story. Like I have a skeleton, but like it's the meat. Like you can't just have a skeleton, you know? So now I have to, actually, you know what? I had kind of a fire metaphor for this, right? Okay, so what I started with, was equivalent to like having the box art for a really cool Lego piece, like let's say Lego Death Star or whatever, or a nice Lego castle. When I started this hiatus was having the box art for that, right? Now, I've written the instructions on how to put that piece together with the skeleton and finding out the Hoenn character arc. Now, with my characters, finding out my characters, I gotta organize my bricks and make sure I've got all the ones I need And then after that, the last step is to actually start building. And if I want to put a little flair on there, like get rid of a brick, leave something out, whatever, then we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But yeah, that is where I'm at. That's where I'm at, and that's where I'm headed. So let me stop talking before this somewhat normal sized episode gets longer. And thank you guys for checking out this episode. And yeah, sorry if I was a little, if I sounded like exhausted. I am a little bit exhausted. Like I had my my detox, and that was really nice, but now I'm like getting tired again, so I'll have to figure that out. But yeah, I thank you guys for sticking through this to this point. Let me know if you have any topics that you want me to talk about. Let me know in the comments, and that'll be all for now. Pakara, I almost said Nation Noodles. Pakara, signing out.